Welcome to another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials, where we help you accelerate your career and turn soft skills into hard money by mining gold from project failures, bringing insights from ecosystem experts and inspiration from others on the trail. Now joining us with over 20 years in the ecosystem, please welcome our host, John Klein.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. I'm delighted today to have Stephen Klein with us. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you for making the time.
It's great to be here. I'm grateful to be here.
Well, I can't think of a person that I have recommended more on LinkedIn over the past 6 months than your profile and the post that you put forward. So I'm really delighted to bring your perspective to my audience today and just continue the conversation.
Oh, it's incredible to hear that. And I truly am grateful and appreciative. And no, it's really great to be here. There's nothing I'd rather talk about than this. So
very good. So on this episode today, we're going to be talking about a little bit of kind of Stephen's trailblazer journey, a little bit of where he's come from, how he got to where he is. And then we're going to talk about the state of AI. We're going to talk about differing perspectives. We're going to talk about kind of hype versus reality. There's some really good data that's come out recently that kind of gives us some clarity. That's going to also touch on a little bit of Agentforce and how Salesforce is going to market and some perspectives on that. And then we're going to think about some next steps and ways that we can kind of navigate through the extremes and look at some products that Stephen's brought to market to try and help us make the most out of who we are. So great. So let's start back with your early days. It looks like you have a fine arts degree in poetry. Tell us more.
I have to come clean with your audience and say that your producer busted me and found out about that, which I don't even know if it's on my LinkedIn. Honestly, maybe it is, but if it is, it's certainly buried deep down inside. Yeah, I have always been absolutely obsessed and in love with literature, art, poetry, because I think at a fundamental level, it is what makes us human. And ironically enough, I think it's what differentiates us from AI. And maybe I knew that before AI showed up, but I see the world through the narratives that are often created in some of the most beautiful and brilliant minds that have ever lived. And quite frankly, I think that all of the wisdom humanity has, all of it, was designed and developed hundreds and hundreds of years ago, if not thousands of years ago. We are not inventing any new wisdom. I think the question for us is whether we understand it well enough to bring it along for the ride.
Yeah, that's such a great
point. And that for me
is
really fundamental at a first principles level, because that's who do we want to grow up to be as a civilization, right?
Mm-hmm. And there's such an important kind of distinction there as we bifurcate wisdom and knowledge, because I think some people think those are synonymous today, but they're very different.
They're completely different. Wisdom is actually difficult to define. We tend to really like very specific, tight definitions for terms, ideas, and concepts, even if they're extraordinarily complex. I think wisdom is almost like what the Supreme Court defined pornography as. It's sort of like I know it when I see it, but it's really hard to define it. But wisdom is sort of the guidelines, the principles, the values, the things that make us special as humans in this universe. The way I see it, it's perspective. Knowledge it's pretty easy. You can vacuum up knowledge every day. Everybody that's listening to this podcast has got a brain full of knowledge. I'm assuming that everybody listening to this podcast has got something going on. The lights are on in someone's home. Wisdom's the hard part, and there's no shortcut.
Sure.
You can't get it's really hard to get wisdom without just stumbling, getting gut punched a bunch of times in life, failing, and you slowly realize what matters and what doesn't, and hopefully you come to this higher plane, and that's wisdom and important. The only shortcut is if you are an avid reader and you study the great works and you study the great minds, the great philosophers. And I've got my favorites. I listen to them almost every night. So going on, and I apologize, but for me, that distinction is huge.
That's good. So I love this. So how did you go from poetry, right, given your obvious passion about the subject, and then ultimately move into right, trying to teach people? It sounds like maybe with brand strategy and such, maybe you're talking about telling stories, how to position and represent, and ultimately you made yourself into the digital space and even to the fintech space.
What most intelligent people would do to answer that question is reverse engineer the insanity of the circuitous route so that it sounds strategic and makes sense, right? But I'm not that creative. It was a series of opportunities, aspects, decisions, and I'm a firm believer that there is no such thing as failure. I think failure is a false construct, and failure is really nothing more than a success that shows up in a new and surprising way.
Yeah, it's like a data
So
point, like a
it's a,
scientist might look at
yeah,
it, right?
you might look like you failed in chapter 3, of Lord of the Flies, but by the end you're rescued.
Hmm.
So, and we don't know the end of the book. We just have to keep going. But it started actually when I'll go really quickly, but the love of my life, my girlfriend, broke up with me in college. And I was devastated. And so I went out and became a big brother because I needed to find something to do that was principle based just to try and find a reason to get up. I was so bummed out. This was UMass Amherst back in the Stone Age. And I wrote a story about being a big brother that got published on the front page of the daily newspaper at UMass Amherst. I was a chemistry major. And all of a sudden, this is a daily, everybody's reading my story. This is really interesting. So I'm going to go into journalism. This is fun. I'm a big man on campus, and he has 40,000 people, and I'm a big shot. So I got into journalism, and I became the editor of the paper in a year and a half. About 400 people. The newspaper serviced the western half of Massachusetts, called the UMass Daily Collegian. And one day I had too many beers, and I decided I would call up Dr. Wang at Wang Laboratories. Most of the people on this call won't know who Wang is. Wang was a gigantic company in the tech world back in the day. And that would be another whole wonderful chapter. But they're the ones who really brought the mainframe and distributed it into the office. You could call it DDP, whatever you want to call it. It was pre-client server,
Okay.
pre-internet. And I was drunk, and I asked for Dr. Wang himself. This was a multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 company. And his assistant just said, like, "Who are you?" I said, I'm Stephen Klein. I'm the editor of the Massachusetts Daily Collegian, and I need some gear. And I'll tell you what, I'll trade some publicity. I'll make you guys look good if you give me some computer gear. I want to automate. They put me in touch with a guy named Ted Leonsis, who now owns the Washington basketball and hockey team, who's still a dear friend who I've known for 50 years. And he used to head of marketing for Wang back then. And he says, "Why don't you get in here?" So my Grateful Dead t-shirt, my earrings. I show up, and he goes, "Well, listen, kid, here's the deal. I really like you. I think you're bright. I think you're smart. I'll hire you this summer. But here's the deal. You're no more Grateful Dead t-shirt, lose the earring, and you're going to have to wear a suit and tie." Sure, no problem. So I start flying around the world writing user stories for this company. And with that portfolio and knowledge around technology, and I really was inside it and in front of customers at a very young age, I was recruited by the largest advertising agency in New England, who happened to have Wang as a client. And I did that for 12 years. I helped grow the business, and we became the largest advertising agency in New England. I was sent to Europe, and I helped build the European operation for this business on the backs of some amazing technology firms, both US-based and European-based. And so of those 12 years, I spent about 5 of them in Europe, living and working in Europe. And then I went corporate. I decided I wanted to be a client. I was getting too old to be in advertising. There's only so much alcohol I can consume and still function. So I went corporate and got recruited by a company called Dun Bradstreet. And I ran product and ran marketing for Dun Bradstreet. And I had, hundreds of people all over the world. And I flew around the world like a crazy man. And they sent me to Harvard as they had this program. Harvard still has these programs called strategic marketing management. It's 2 weeks. And they liked me and they were really kind to me and good to me. And I was good to them. And they sent me to this full-time 2 week program. And I fell in love with Harvard because it was like pitching for the Red Sox. It was like, wow, this is a pretty big deal. I went to UMass, which was a state school. I just felt I was just, kind of a bum. I'm at Harvard now. Whoa, this is amazing. Flew back to Atlanta, told my wife that I want to go to Harvard. She said, no way. You've got a great job, a great career. You're doing great. There's no way you're quitting. I said, I want to go to Harvard. She said, tell you what, if you apply and you get in, we'll go. But that's the only school you apply to. I got in, went, got my MBA, taught marketing, studied, came out to Silicon Valley, and have been helping build companies and destroy companies, both ever since. I tend to have two outcomes. Either I build this glorious, glorious, magnificent thing, and or I just go down in flames. But yeah, so that's sort of the short version. And poetry and literature was always the sideshow, but it drove my philosophy of the world, my view of the world.
So as
and
you
it
look
still
back,
does.
yeah, I love it. And then thinking about that as you look back through kind of the various circuitous stops that you had to your career to date, if you think about like a common thread that you really kind of guided the process, can you look back and kind of highlight that? And that might be a good pivot point as we think about kind of what we're looking at moving forward.
Yeah, it was always ethics, values, and principles. But my frustration is that the business world, and come on, I'm a hardcore capitalist pig. I mean, I went to the Pentagon of capitalism, right? I'm a general of capitalism. I'm a Harvard MBA. I mean, I get that world, but it tends to bifurcate ethics and principles over here and Machiavelli over here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Machiavelli's cool because Machiavelli's fast. Machiavelli's about profit. Machiavelli's about bumping up right up against the line of the law. Forget ethics and optimizing shareholder value. And ethics, values, and principles are sort of either a paint job,
Mm-hmm.
something, or a defensive strategy against potential liability on the legal side.
Veneer.
But I always saw that, in fact, that was opposite, that that ethics and principles and guidelines and values are what can actually optimize profit and success. And somehow people didn't put that together. And I was always trying to figure out how to put that together.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. So I'm curious, as you think about this kind of history, you go to Harvard MBA. What are you teaching now at Berkeley?
I teach entrepreneurship, marketing, research, artificial intelligence strategy, and artificial intelligence ethics, AI ethics. I guess if you had to choose one particular topic that I might be referred to as an expert, which is really not accurate because there are no experts in AI. There's anybody that says they're an expert is just full of it. But that would be that would be the claim I could make. AI ethics is sort of my primary area. I develop workshops and content. I teach ethics. I develop workshops for India on the topic of AI ethics. And my company is based on it right now that we're building. So mostly engineers, undergraduate and graduate. And I love it because if you can't teach something, you don't actually know it.
Mm-hmm.
You think you know stuff until you have to explain it in a way that somebody understands that doesn't know it.
Yes.
And most people skip that step. So what happens is they think they know a whole lot more than they do know. They don't know what they don't know. Teaching keeps me honest, and it's also a way that I can genuinely try and help launch wonderful younger people into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So
Love it.
I love it. I love it. I would pay to do it.
Yeah, it's great. And then you get paid to do it. So thinking about,
Not much, John. No,
well,
I
the
mean,
audience,
seriously, you don't do that for the money.
right? I get it. Yeah, it's like being a coach. So our audience is primarily related to the Salesforce ecosystem, and you've probably seen, Salesforce marketing, advertising around their product called Agentforce, which is essentially kind of a response to the what they would call the DIY kind of, AI framework of doing things that, can be a little bit unsafe at times, whatever it might be. The contention I have is that certainly AI has a lot of good uses. I certainly also agree with the writers of the book AI Snake Oil, right in their first introduction, highlight that says, well, when you say AI, it's like saying there's all kinds of vehicles in the world. And vehicles just got faster. And you're like, well, what vehicle got faster? Was it the bike or the car or the rocket? Or right? So he's like, we need to really get better at, first of all, talking about when we say AI, what do we actually mean? And because there's some AI, right, research or organizational that's been great for decades. And then there's some AI that is, like for example, human behavior predictive AI, which is just absolutely abysmal and will never succeed. Um, so, with the contention I have with on the Salesforce side is that I think there's a great product, but how we're going to market, I actually really like the way you talked about the way that these kind of sometimes the people first concerns, right? Those aspects around values and ethics and culture and elements are somewhat separated from the right people or the excuse me the profit process, those aspects that really want to be driven, and that they really need to be combined and they need to be merged, and trying to create a path to do that. But I'm curious, just from your perspective, you're seeing it much wider than the Salesforce world. Help us understand a little bit of kind of what the current state of AI, which would include perceptions, right? These are a lot of things that people are seeing, and kind of what your take is on what we see today, and we'll dig into some of the detail as it relates to what's actually reality, what we could likely expect. I have a few stats to share from other people like Professor Darren at MIT. He's got some good insight, and I know you have. I love the citations you put on your LinkedIn profiles because I actually go to those citations and become informed in a much deeper way, even beyond the point you were originally making, which I find very, very helpful.
Thank you. I have got a lot of very strong feelings on this topic. I am actually either knowledgeable enough or delusional enough to actually believe I see the way. And I see where we're all stumbling right now. And I'm frustrated because there aren't technology challenges that I can see. It's all people, marketing, positioning, mind state challenges. Primarily because the way to make money fast right now is to do it wrong.
Hmm.
Adverb.
So the incentives are misaligned right now.
ROI, fundamental MBA basis, is it's easy to go to a company and say to the CEO and the CFO that I've got a technology that will cut costs, optimize efficiencies, automate process. You'll be able to take people out, which I'm sure you'd like to do because you're laying people off all the time. And that way you will basically boost your margin. You'll increase your profit, your share price, and you'll have a great call with Wall Street. That's like sex for a CFO. That's like sex for a CFO. That's the current model. That's how it's being sold. If you really want to boil it all down, and you can say either do it yourself or we'll. But basically, it's an automation, process efficiency, optimization, cost savings, money extraction industry right now. And that is what it is. It's not my opinion. That is absolutely
Mhm.
what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's my anecdotal experience. I mean, one of the
It's
complaints I
it's
have is
yeah.
the statistics, right? People put up all the statistics around like production, productivity, efficiency, et cetera, and people look at that and they're not happy about it in the way that they would be with other products because it impacts the social contract. It impacts this aspect of saying, okay, for that to be successful, I then have to be unsuccessful.
The zero sum versus the value creation. And
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. But The problem that makes this even more complicated is when we say the data. Based on my assessment, roughly 80% of the industry data, which drives the industry narrative, which is supposedly the objective path, is cooked. It's cooked. The data isn't real. The data is really a sales funnel for primarily the privately held AI firms that are losing money, that need to raise more capital, as well as the larger management consulting firms who are primarily the only ones making money. So you've got this really interesting ecosystem if you really want to take a look at the macro perspective. And you kind of have to understand what's going on. Forgive me, but let's just rewind. Let's just do a really quick time travel to the 1600s. And in the 1600s, there was something called tulip mania, which was when Holland went insane on the value of tulips. And people kept buying more and more tulips and paying, they sold their houses to buy tulip bulbs. And it became an absolute delusion, popular delusion, a bubble, a mania. That was the first reported mania or bubble in economics and history. Since then, we've had a lot, but we would all be familiar with .com. That was the same thing. We're '08 in real estate, Wall Street. To understand generative AI right now, I would argue we are clearly right now in the middle toward the end of a bubble. And we can go into that if you'd like, because the data, without any doubt, draws a straight line from tulips to now. Okay, and we can talk about that. That would be an entire episode. But that's important because that actually at a fundamental level drives what most of these companies, including Salesforce, are selling and what the customers within the Fortune 500 are theoretically, conceptually buying, which is bullshit, quite frankly. There's another trend, though, that's really critical to understand what's going on right now, which is the sugar industry in the 50s. The sugar industry had a technology called sugar. It turned out it wasn't as great as people thought. Gen AI is, error prone 30 to 70% of the time. So we really don't want to advertise the hallucination issue because that makes automation completely inconceivable. You can't replace a monkey with something that makes mistakes 70% of the time. But let's take that. The sugar in the 50s was a technology that started getting busted for killing people. That was a problem. So what they did is they realized that they could hire with all of their money institutions, medical institutions. They could hire university and educational institutions.
Research institutions.
And guess what? They could find out through all of these studies that sugar was actually good for you. The bad guy was fat. And they were able to, with their billions of dollars, drive that narrative and drive the sugar industry through all of the reality. Now comes the 80s, the 90s. Tobacco saw that playbook, and wow, did they perfect it. And one of my most fun things in my classes is to show them all of the ads for cigarettes, or the promotions where they handed them out on cigarette, or handed them out on ski slopes. They handed them out at universities.
Yeah, they put them in MRE bags for people in the military. They handed them out in hospitals, on hospital beds.
Yeah, they did. And they had the data to support the fact that cigarettes were good for you. They were sexy. You'd meet much more beautiful people if you smoked. Doctors loved cigarettes, and nurses in hospitals smoked all the time. And eventually the reality catches up. There's no industry that has enough money to indefinitely distort reality forever. So if you take the mania bubble trend and you take the sort of marketing myopia trend, then you know exactly where we are right now within the industry. Okay. And so right now, 99% of this industry that's making money is management consultants and consulting and services. They're putting out the fire they created, and they're creating even more fire. something like 70-80% of these pilots fail inside these companies.
Yeah,
The average management consulting engagement is somewhere between $5 and $15 million, and for that, the company gets an average of 70 slides, one pilot, usually GPT because it's easy, it's closed source, and a press release that says that they're AI first. And that's the state of the business right now, and it's going to collapse. And it isn't a technology challenge. Call AI, Gen AI 2.0, and Salesforce will get there really fast and be super successful. Will be an automation model, augmentation model. It will be a model in which people that are creating the technology and selling the technology and buying the technology will be looking at it not purely as a means by which they can optimize process and automate the factory, which is kind of industrial age, is what we're doing right now, but they can actually take their people and they can elevate the entire game beyond anything we could imagine. So the companies that figure out that they can use these tools for strategic purpose, for ideation, not to replace people, but to basically level them up, partner with them, not only are going to become much more efficient on the bottom line, but they're going to actually do something that most businesses aren't doing right now, which is growing the top line. And part of the narrative and part of the myth that's going on right now is that there are actually no net job losses because of generative AI in the United States of America. None. Yet Dara Modi told us 2 weeks ago there was a bloodbath. It's not true. They're having layoffs. It's cyclical. Every 10 to 12 years, there's layoffs. You can't automate a worker with current state of Gen AI. It doesn't work. It's too unreliable. You'd have to bring AI in to manage the AI, and then you'd have turtles all the way down, or you'd have to bring people in to manage the AI, and you fired the person to put the AI, and you got to bring them back to manage the AI that you fired for in the first place. And that's where we're at. But for a very, very small incremental investment, maybe 1% of what you'd pay a person, max, you can partner these people with this extraordinary technology that Salesforce can deliver. It's not a technology issue, and you can literally elevate the entire game. So that's where this goes: automation to augmentation. And there's a little context of why we are where we are at a high level, and I can go deeper, but that's what's going on. That's the reality.
It's helpful,
and that's the poetry of what's going on, the fiction of what's going on now, the stories that are being told.
No, it's a really interesting point, and I think about one point I want to have is a little sidebar in that, thinking about how long the delusion can be maintained. Sounds with technology right now, it probably can be maintained a little longer than maybe we've been able to do.
A longer tail than in the past.
Yes, than in the past. And thinking about the fact that we have these models that are kind of having updates periodically, and the models are trained by publicly available data. Well, since more and more people are trusting in Gen AI to create more and more of this data, it seems inevitable that we're going to be in this essentially static,
is eating itself.
Yes, the static.
It's called recursive.
Loop.
It's unbelievable. Thank you for saying it's unbelievable. It's so obvious that it's going to become more useless and meaningless.
Yes, not better. It's going to become worse over time because the training data.
As defined by average.
Yes.
As defined by regression to the mean. As defined by the more we use it and work, the more like everyone else we become, the less differentiation, the less value. We're working ourselves into a place where we will have less value. And when I mean we, I mean the Fortune 500, small to medium-sized business and individuals.
Yes, the reason I highlight
it's fascinating, right, Joe? Yes, it's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
I mean, I love this stuff.
It's funny because I listen to podcasts like the AI Daily Brief, and they are advocating you need to be moving faster. You need to get people going faster. And I listen to that, and I'm like, do people not see the waterfall at the end of this river? Like, it's just inevitable.
No, they don't. We've been turned into. It's fear and greed. We all know fear and greed are hugely powerful motivators for people, and the marketing industry understands this. And so, right now, this industry is being 100% driven by the individual business person's fear of being left behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was
And
actually
so,
speaking to, I mean, I was
yeah,
actually speaking to an executive leader 2 weeks ago at an event in Texas. And I highlighted, I said, um, I highlighted this element. I call it co-op AI. Augmentation is it's kind of a rough word, right? So I call it co-op AI. It's basically like we are working together, and I want to put a cape on my role rather than an
I may,
escape
I
on
may,
my
I
role.
may, I may use that. That you're right. That is a lot
Right.
more. Yeah.
So I was talking about this, and her perspective was, she goes, well, we just have to hustle because nobody wants to work with a dinosaur when it comes to AI, right? Like the primary driver and motivation is that we don't want to be left behind.
Isn't
And
it
I think
amazing?
about it is, and I think about for me, I'm advocating like, hold on, you can't start in chapter 7 of the book. We got to go back to chapter 1 and onboard people and get them really aligned to what we're doing and enlist them with all their expertise. There's no way to replace them. We need to then complement them and share all they have with everybody else.
The problem is so crystal clear and obvious if you see it, which 90% of the world doesn't yet, unfortunately. I can't believe I'm saying that I can see something other people can't, but either the future will look back at me and say I'm insane or I was right. It doesn't really matter, quite frankly, but you agree with me, so thank you. So
Well, and
there
I
are
feel the
some of
same
us
way.
around,
Like I'm
right? There
telling
are some
people
of
to
us around.
slow
It's frustrating. I
down.
want to shake people up,
Yeah.
but the solution is so simple. That's what really the right thing to do, as defined by what's best for your business, is just so simple. You just have to do what Steve Jobs said, which is just think different.
Hmm.
You just have to see things almost opposite. And once you get that insight, you realize it all comes together. And this technology is absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. There's never been a more magnificent, beneficial technology, I believe, created by humanity. And right now, it's basically like we invented fire and we're just burning everything down. we created electricity and we're just electrocuting each other. We're like, isn't that fun? Eventually, we'll figure out we'll have toasters, but we're just like a bunch of kids with these new toys, and we're giving monkeys typewriters and calling them Shakespeare, and
Hmm.
it's such bullshit.
Hmm.
The tool doesn't make the person
Sure.
better from a craft perspective. It makes them faster if they know what they're doing.
Hmm.
But so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about
Well, I think what
the
I'd like to
problem
do,
or the solution, or what the yeah.
yeah, what I'd like
How,
to think of, because people on this call, right? I think the some of the takeaways here are thinking about when they're in their own organizations and they're thinking about how to find areas where AI can tap into that brilliance without sacrificing the
yes,
value of the people that we have. I want to talk. So co-op AI is definitely one of those areas. I also want to talk about reflective AI and just get your back, kind of your perspective on why did you choose to what is reflective AI as it compares to, Gen AI and co-op AI and some of these other avenues that are out there. And then why did you choose that direction to kind of put forth a product versus, one of these others in the co-op AI space?
there's so much to unpack there. If I was the CEO of a company, which I am actually, but if I were the CEO of a small to medium sized business, or if I were the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and I was sitting by myself wondering what I really ought to be doing, like what's the right thing to do here? How do I actually benefit my shareholders, get the board of directors off my back, and basically build this company? Because right now I'm frustrated because we're dismantling it. We're laying people off and we're buying our stock back. That is not a long-term strategy. I would advise that person, him or her, to take a deep breath, find some courage to stand up and not get so bullied, get informed so you can go back to the board and give them a piece of your mind because you're CEO. And I would start at the beginning, which is, what business are you in? What is your vision? And I don't mean some stupid poster on the wall that says you want to be, in the top 3 in this particular vertical industry with a 62% margin. I mean, really, why are you in the business you're in? And if you disappeared tomorrow, why would anybody miss you? And you need to answer that question at a first principles level, because you're the CEO and you can't delegate that. And if you can't answer that question, you're gone. And then I would bring my organization in. I'd bring my leadership team. I'd sit them all down and say, here's where I'm at. Here's what I believe makes us special. Here's where we create value. Here's how we're going to make a lot of money. Here's how we're going to return value to our shareholders. Here's my view of the world in 6 months, a year, 5. And I would literally sell them and get them all engaged and all on board. And if I couldn't get them all on board, I'd fire the ones I couldn't. And I'd bring in people. So if I was going to have any layoffs, it would be at the top level. And then I'd have buy-in. And then I would see myself as CEO. Now I'm going to be in the thought leadership business because I am a leader. And I would look at it as, I need to now get out in front of this thing, our vision, our purpose, who we are. And I've got to unify my entire employee and customer ecosystem around that, which is not that hard to do. People are looking for good, positive news. People are really hungry for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And that at that point, only then are we ready to talk about the technology. Okay. Now that we've figured out the organization, the vision, the mission, we've unified and built morale, and we've got an employee base that's fired up, and we've got a customer base that's excited, which you kind of need, customers and employees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you kind of need that. Then I would talk about generative AI and ML both, not just Gen AI. Gen AI sucked all the oxygen out of the room because it's tulips. But ML is a different related technology. I would look at the entire organization. I would look at it as a platform. I would look at it as a platform that combines both open source and closed source technology.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to get locked into paying token fees forever. You want your own mainframe back in the 70s. You don't want to do timeshare and pay some mainframe company forever and ever to rent it. Closed source is rental.
Mm-hmm. So
I build this platform, which the technology's there. I'm not delegating to IT, because then you're just going to get, no offense, you'll get Salesforce and Microsoft in there, and you'll end up with a tool. I would delegate to the entire team: HR, IT, marketing, finance, legal, compliance. Get them all engaged on an open source, closed source platform. I would be foundational model agnostic. I would go multi-LLM, at least initially, because each of these models has strengths and weaknesses if you kind of really look carefully.
Mm-hmm.
They're each better at certain things than others are. There's certain things that I love all of them, by the way.
Sure. I want to make sure this is helpful, but I think we need to reserve this for a future episode. I want to make sure and talk about, we have about just a little over 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we dig into why reflective AI and what was the vision there.
Thank you. So you want to force me to promote myself?
Well, I think
very kind.
I want to talk about the paradigm.
Kind. There is a paradigm.
Yes.
It's similar to co-op.
Yep.
Or augmentation. They're all basically different terms for something very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Why reflective AI? Because back about 3 years ago when I founded this company, I saw the entire generative AI industry basically training humanity to become prompt engineers. And that's kind of weird. I didn't sign up to be a prompt engineer. So all of a sudden, one day we all woke up and we were prompting an AI and it was performing tasks for us. I said, but no one's prompting me. I said, Plato didn't prompt Socrates. Socrates educated Plato and made Plato better by forcing Plato to reflect and think more critically and be more creative, push the boundaries of imagination. So I think the power lies within each of us to reflect more deeply on all of those amazing things we can develop if we actually use our brains and do the hard work. So reflective AI was designed as a co-op AI agent or partner that would work with somebody and help them solve their problem for themselves in a dramatically better way than they could without it, and or that the AI could do without them. So reflection was literally a means by which the AI and our AI is the opposite. Alice is what I named her after, Alice in Wonderland. When Alice shows up, she actually doesn't come with any answers, which is frustrating for a lot of people. She has a lot of questions. She's curious. Curiouser is the name of my company. So she asks you lots and lots of questions, and she's trained epistemologically. She's trained Socrates. There's some Steve Jobs in there. There's some Clayton Christensen in there. Bottom line is that she challenges you and makes you work harder and slows you down so that two things happen. She's getting to know you at a really deep level and what matters to you and what you really need to accomplish at a first principle level. And you're getting to know yourself at a deeper level and think more critically. That's the difference. That's what reflective AI is. I would argue that would be a reasonable definition for co-op AI. And then you take that and you scale it across an entire organization and you're rocking.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the differentiator for me between reflective and co-op would be that the co-op AI can be in the same way that you have trained the reflective AI on Socrates, Steve Jobs, Clayton Christensen, these various kind of great thinkers and how they go about solving, and coming to great ideas. Co-op AI can be customized and grounded in the very particular data of a business. Support
Well, that
history,
requires the training data.
emails.
That's now
Yes.
you're bordering on machine learning, and that is the other piece. I don't have an ML company, but you're absolutely right. You're more than right. Right. You have to combine that generative AI
Yes.
capability with an ML capability that is specific to that organization, which would then require structured, unstructured data.
Correct. That's
and
how
training.
I look at co-op
And
AI.
that's
Yes.
yes. I guess I think you've got half of it. I've got half of it.
Yes.
And they're not, it's not an either or. That's the beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's not an either or. It's very much, it's co-op, in a weird way. But I think the problem Gen AI needs to solve is problem solving itself, right? If it can help solve the problems that individuals have better than they can do it themselves, but not for them, with them.
That's a key dimension there is there's a temptation to want to, just like many of my clients over the years. I mean, I've been in consulting for 24 years, and there are times where the client is looking to delegate their decision making to me because they don't want the responsibility. They're not doing it because they believe that I can make the decision better, that I have the information like they do, that I know their team, that I know their go-to-market and all of this. Because of course I don't compared to them. But they delegate it because it's either easy or it's a way to abdicate responsibility. They're scared of the accountability. And I see the temptation today in that people still they don't want to be sharpened so they can actually cut better. They want to delegate the ability to do the cut to someone else or to this tool and make the decision there. And then maybe that makes my life easier, and I hope it gets it right because, it's a probability tool, right? But if it's 70% wrong, and if it's Machiavellian in its nature.
And it's 70% wrong going 1,000 times faster.
Yeah.
That's insanity. And that is actually, instead of business strategy, it is business insanity. But here's the thing. Let's divide the Fortune 500 into two categories of CEOs. The CEOs that have courage and the CEOs who don't. I don't know how many have courage. I could start by taking out the ones who are doing all the layoffs and buying all their stock back and say they probably don't have a whole lot of vision. Tim Cook's not doing any of that.
Well, now you think of Duolingo and you think of,
Yeah,
like the buy now, pay later, Klarna, right? Like they didn't have courage in the beginning, but now
but
they
they have
do.
unbelievable. Talk about stepping up. Instead of, I have so much. IBM is in that same boat. So the answer, I think, is that you can't. Technology is not going to turn somebody who's scared into a courageous person. You're not going to create superheroes. You got
Mhm.
to find the superheroes. You got to find the people who have somewhere along the way decided that they're willing to take some risk
Mhm.
to create a better future and to build their company, which means an investment and belief in the future, not an extraction scheme today.
Mhm.
Once you find that person, John, you'll kick ass with them as an advisor to them. But you can't, I won't, on our advisory side of the business, if we can't work with the CEO and if the CEO isn't willing to step out in front of this from a thought leadership perspective, from an organizational perspective, we won't work with them. And they're more likely to want to call up, McKinsey or BCG, because those are the firms that you not only delegate it to them, but they give you insurance policy of coverage. So if it doesn't go well, you've done everything you've done everything you can. So you're fine. You're fine, right? That's the ultimate kind of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, well,
But
that's the
so
assumption that you're fine, right? That's the
yeah.
assumption that you're
Well, you're
fine.
fine from your
If
own
you have,
personal career perspective, but you're
yes.
trading your company's future for your own. As a
Mhm.
CEO, you'll last longer because you made the right moves by doing the same things everyone else was doing.
Yeah. Which
But your
feels safe.
organization,
Yeah.
which is not going to be a long-term plan. So what I would say, John, is that the people in the business world that will benefit from people like you or me or people like us are the people who realize this is about leadership and this is about courage way before it's about a tool.
Yep. Agreed. I mean, I put that under the mantra of people first.
Yeah,
That's how I
people
talk about it.
think different was the smartest idea in marketing, in my humble opinion, in history. Steve Jobs is my hero. I wish he was here today. The whole world would look different.
Mm-hmm.
AI first is the stupidest idea I have ever heard
Mm-hmm.
because by definition, it means people last. With one term, you have taken your entire employee base of 100,000 people and turned them into terrorists against you. You have literally alienated and betrayed your entire organization with one press release. That's not intelligent. And then you want to put a bunch of bots in between you and your customers, which are pissing them off. So
Sure.
now you've alienated your customers, you've alienated your employees. What are you going to do next? Oh, take your message and your reputation and dumb that down by putting automation between your marketing and brand people in the outside world so that you are regressing to the mean. Now you've done the trifecta. You're hurting your brand,
Wow.
you're alienating your customers, and you're turning your entire employee base into terrorists. Job well done. You can still cut some more people and buy some more stock back. You'll be okay for another year or two. But then what?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And how long are the people going to stay?
They'll
Right.
they'll stay and they'll stay as long as they have to. They're prisoners because they're afraid to leave and they're afraid to speak up. But as soon as the market turns around, and it will, we're right now. I think we're in the down. We're in the lowest point right now of a belt tightening recession in tech. So these layoffs would be happening anyway.
Mhm.
Soon they're gonna start hiring people back. And the moment these companies start hiring people back, and it happens regularly. It's a cycle. People don't realize that. They think this is the end of the world. It's not. That's when these people will all bolt and go to the companies who they believe have more of the values that
Yeah.
represent
Those
their
people first
interests.
priorities.
And those are the people first companies are going to cash in. cash in the next year, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a revolution, and it's going to be a beautiful thing to
Yeah,
watch.
I agree. It's going to be a beautiful thing. Well,
Uh,
for our first episode, we have much more we could cover, I'm sure, but this has been tremendous. I will put a link to Curiouser.ai. I've actually used it myself and found it intriguing. And so thank you for that. I think it's only,
John,
you have
thank you. I couldn't ask from, I literally, I almost feel like I'm on a book tour or something, like, read my book. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. She's an MVP. She's being right now. She's being driven off of 5 large language models. So she's like Perplexity. She's a blend
Right.
because we don't have our own foundational model.
Sure.
That we're a few $1 billion shy of that, being able to build that. But I appreciate that. I still see her as a vision for what will become reality and scale very, very soon. We will build businesses. We won't be dismantling them for much longer, and we will be creating jobs.
Yeah.
And I really want to be around to see that. And
Yeah,
I
love
really
it.
want to be around to help build that. And that's
Yep.
where we're headed.
I
That's where we're
agree.
headed, sir.
It's a bullish future. Well, thank you for your time today. We look
Never
forward
been
to
more
next time.
optimistic about life ever than I am right now. We'll get through it.
Love it. Well,
Thank
thank you
you
for your time. And until next time.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. If you found this episode valuable, we would love your help reaching others. Please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and share this with another who would benefit.